Hi everybody, TJ Mack of Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. Since I've started my YouTube channel, I've made 292 videos. I know it's unlikely that my family will ever watch them all, and that's totally understandable, but there are a few things about my collection that I really want them to know. For starters, Mickey Mantle is my favorite player to collect. Like a lot of collectors, my love for his cards and collecting in general goes all the way back to my childhood. Over the years, I may have shared bits and pieces of these stories, but I want to bring it all together in one video, something I can hold on to. It began with a familiar place from my childhood, Kmart. When I was a kid, I used to go to Kmart all the time, and most of the time it was with my mom. But every May, during planting season, my dad would come along too. I still remember walking into the garden center. The smell hit you as soon as the doors opened. A warm, earthy mix of damp soil, fresh flowers, and mulch. There was a hint of fertilizer in the air, a little sharp, but familiar. And then there was just a trace of chemicals mixed in that added a synthetic smell that was clean and crisp. Kind of like the start of baseball season, those visits were a sign that summer was coming, and it's something that always stuck with me. After a few minutes of walking around, I'd ask my parents if I could go and check out the toy aisle. Back then, parents didn't really worry much about letting you wander off on your own. I'd run towards the toy section, searching for the latest pocket superheroes, or G.I. Joes, or Matchbox cars. And if I was lucky, and my parents had a few extra dollars, one of them would end up going home with me. It was Kmart that helped spark my love for old baseball cards and for learning about players I never actually saw play. I still remember the box set that they released in the summer of 1982 for their 20th anniversary. It featured MVPs from 1962 to 1981, and my parents bought me one for just a couple of bucks. And I took that home and I must have looked through it hundreds of times. My favorite was the card showing the 1962 Topps Mickey Mantle. I've talked about this set many times before, how for a lot of us kids that are my age, it became a gateway into vintage cards. Funny thing is, I hadn't actually seen this set in person since the 1980s. That changed last week when my oldest daughter, Catherine, surprised me with the full set. And right there in the box was the Mickey Mantle card. It was the first time I'd held that card in my hands in over 40 years. I was just 7 years old when I first saw it, and I was already a Yankees fan, but I didn't know that much about Mickey Mantle, just that he was one of the greats. But you see, it wasn't the stats or the stories that drew me in. It was something else. Maybe it was his name. It was bold and unforgettable. Maybe it was the way he looked, like a movie star, the perfect image of a baseball player. Long before I knew about the tape measure home runs, the injuries he played through, or the World Series championships, all I knew was that something about the image of Mickey Mantle just pulled me in, and he stayed with me ever since. As the years passed, I learned more about Mickey Mantle. Not just the tape measure home runs, but the speed and the pain he played through. He wasn't just a slugger, he was a once-in-a-generation athlete. I read about how he could drag bunt for base hits by outrunning infielders. And I began to understand the kind of greatness he represented, and how his lifestyle and injuries took a heavy toll on him. On vacations in the mid-'80s, I would visit my grandparents in Florida, and I'd stop at flea markets and card shops. And I'd see Mickey Mantles behind locked glass cases here and there, but they were always way too expensive. But they were always worth dreaming about as well, that maybe one day I would own one. Then in 1988, that dream came true. I put a 1965 Topps Mantle on layaway at a local card shop. I delivered newspapers at the time and saved up $75 and eventually brought that card home. I was the only kid in my neighborhood with a real playing days Mantle. Even my older brother didn't have one. Now back then you didn't scroll through listings online, you took what the card shop had, and at that time they had a 65 Topps Mantle. It showed an aging Mickey finishing his swing in a classic pose. Who knew when that card came out that his best years were already behind him? I placed that card in a thick holder and set it on my shelf like a trophy. Even though I never saw him play, Mantle always felt present in my life, through his cards, through stories, through old video footage. And as I got older, I came to understand something deeper. Mickey Mantle wasn't just my favorite player, he was my dad's hero. My dad was born in 1948, and he was just 8 years old when Mantle won the Triple Crown in 1956. That was his guy, his Superman. And when I see this 1959 Topps Mantle in my collection, I think about that. I know my dad collected cards in 1959, and that's one he would have stared at as a kid, just like I'm doing now. I've always liked this card because it's where Mantle's boyish look begins to give way to more mature presence. By 1961, when Mantle and Maris were chasing Ruth's record, my dad would have been 13 years old. What an exciting summer it must have been to be a baseball fan. Not just because of the home run race, but if you're a Yankees fan, they had a historic season as well, fielding one of the greatest teams in baseball history. And here's my favorite picture of Roger and the Mick. It was taken on September 20th, 1961, after the Yankees defeated the Baltimore Orioles 4-2. Maris had just hit his 59th home run, and Mantle is next to him in street clothes, dealing with an infection and missing the game. He was sitting at 53 home runs. And what I love about this photo is you can tell that they genuinely like each other. It's just a natural smile on Mickey and Roger's face, and I just always appreciated that. Now, Mantle's career, it would continue to parallel my dad's childhood. And by 1967, my dad was 19 years old, and Mantle, now battered and aging, was nearing the end. He was still feared at the plate, still dangerous, but limping, hurting, fading. My dad's childhood hero was becoming human. When my dad was dying, he gave me this 1967 Topps Mantle. And this was the year that Mickey hit his 500th home run on Mother's Day. I still watch this clip on YouTube, and I'm going to show it to you right now.
The Yankees go on the road and won't be back until Memorial Day. May the 30th, doubleheader against the Minnesota Twins. First game at 1. Here's the payoff pitch. This is it! There it goes! It's out of here!
There's something both sad and comforting about seeing Mantle head down, not showboating, just rounding the bases like it was any other hit. You can see he has pain in his legs. And this 1967 card reminds me of that moment. About a month ago, I picked up this sport magazine from April 1969 commemorating Mickey's retirement. He said simply, "I can't hit anymore." 4 months after that issue hit newsstands, my parents got married. My dad, who was now 21, stepped out of his childhood and left Mickey behind. But I bet he never imagined that his son would later collect his cards and that his grandson would wear his uniform number. About 5 years ago, our family received a very special piece of memorabilia, a signed sheet featuring the 1952 Yankees on Sereno Hotel stationery, the place the team stayed at during spring training. This is the centerpiece of my collection. My wife's great aunt, her daughter was married to Archie Wilson, who played with the Yankees and briefly roomed with Mantle during spring training in 1951. He used to visit my wife's dad and uncle when they were teenagers, tossing the ball around with them in front of their house. In Jane Levy's book, The Last Boy, she wrote about how Archie, returning from military service, arrived at Yankee spring training to find both beds in his room taken. Archie's widow, Sybil, recalled how her husband set his things on a rollaway cot, and Mantle rose from his bed and said, "You're not going to sleep on that cot." Mantle insisted on taking the cot himself because Wilson was an Army vet and Mantle Sr. Levy also described how shy Mickey was during DiMaggio's final days, when reporters would hound him about taking over center field. Mantle would hide behind Archie in the hotel lobby. Now, in the spring of 1952, my father-in-law and his brother wrote letters to Archie, and each received a sheet of hotel stationery signed by the team. We have one of them, and my brother-in-law has the other. Both include a very early Mantle signature, along with other players, to be including stars and Hall of Famers from that era. Now, the photo I used to represent my channel shows the Yankees outfield from March 3rd, 1952, taken just a few weeks before these autographs arrived. Now, I may not have the largest or most valuable Mickey Mantle collection, but that's not how I measure its worth. Because for me, Mantle connects two childhoods, my dad's and mine. He ties me to a time when baseball cards were more than cardboard. They were magic. He represents more than greatness on the field. He represents memories, stories, legacies. I may have never seen Mantle play, but in a way, I spent my whole life watching him, through cards, through stories, through the eyes of my father. And that's why he'll always be my favorite player to collect. I hope you have a great weekend, and until next time, take care.